So you knew that there was, when you read through it, you knew there was something intriguing.
Yeah, fabulous read.
Yeah. Okay, and
Fabulous.
so then what happened after that? I mean, what?
Well, I called him the next day and I said, what do you send me this for? And he says, why, what do you mean? I said, well, what do you want to do with it?
Yeah.
And he said, I don't do anything with it. I just wanted to share it with you. And I go, oh, okay. I said, I think you'd really want to consider publishing it. And
Okay.
he said, really, you think it could be published? And, there were some things as a writer that I would say, it's a first draft. It probably needs some other work. And there's some...
Because Paul really is not a writer.
Well, he is a writer. I mean, he says he's not. He says he's an accidental author, but he's written all of his life. He's obviously very gifted with words.
Okay.
But there were problems with the manuscript and the story, and it was kind of this blend of a really incredible story and some really incredible theological insights, but they weren't blending quite the way I thought they could.
Okay.
So I made some suggestions. If you want to publish this, here's what I'd suggest you do. And
Right.
he said, well, I really don't think I want to do that. So I said, fine. And we had this conversation every few weeks for a few months until he finally decided, you know what, I think I do want to do something with this. And I said, well, okay. I said, what do you want to do? He said, well, I want to do what you're suggesting. He said, but that's what he said to me. He said, I feel like I'm done with this book. I feel like if this is going to go anywhere, somehow you're involved.
Okay.
And I said, oh, no, don't put that on me, dude. I got my own stuff I'm trying to write. Write your own deal. And he just said, somehow I think you're involved, and he didn't know how to take it any further. And so I said, fine. And I wasn't planning on doing anything with it, but I get that nudge of the Holy Spirit saying, help this guy with his book. And
Okay.
so I ended up, meeting with him with some other guys. We talked about doing a movie from this story, and we talked about how we'd need to package the book to make that story work. And one thing led to another. None of this was pre-planned, none of this was orchestrated, but we spent 16 months with Paul rewriting the entire book, myself and him and my podcast partner, Brad Cummings.
Okay, so the we is you three.
The three of us.
And you spent 16 months
after
you had the rough draft.
Yeah, we were doing other things in those 16 months. It wasn't, but over 16 months. We rewrote. I mean, there were times we had 4 or 5 versions of various chapters floating between us and trying to get the language right, trying to get the story right, trying to get something we thought would resonate. And we actually didn't write the book for believers. We actually wrote the book, and we never positioned it as a Christian novel. We put it as just a novel to be in the bookstores because we really wanted a story that would unveil the God of the Bible to a world who doesn't know him.
Yeah.
And that was the plan.
Okay. So over this 16 months, then what was, one of the things that I'd read when I was kind of, thinking about having this discussion was out of, I think, the Times, was talking about there were a number of rewrites. Is that correct?
Ended up being 4 different rewrites. I mean, we never planned to do 4. You do 1 and you're going, yeah, this is it. And then we're reading it, and we're having some people read it, and they're going, no, it's not ready yet. So then we do it again, and then we're sure it's done.
Okay.
But it's not, so.
Okay, so then you get to the point where you're like, okay, after the 4th one, we're okay here. What then? Because it's not, did you try to then, since you're not a publisher, did you try to get it published? How did that work?
Yeah, first of all, let me say this. That 16 months, that collaboration between 3 brothers who in that time grew in a friendship, collaborate. I understand why God's a community, Father, Son, and Spirit.
Yeah.
When you really, how wonderful it is when brothers dwell together in unity. I mean, the joy we had in working on this together, the laughter that we had, the tense moments of what's better, and at every point we're deferring to Paul. It's Paul's book, ultimately. So at the end of the day, it's not, well, I'm going to fight for my point. Paul, this is what we think makes it better. Your call.
Okay.
And so we had that, and then I was going to represent it to the publishing world. I've been contributing editor at Leadership Journal. I published with 4 different publishers myself. So let's take it to people I know in the publishing industry and find a publisher. And we went to probably a couple of dozen, and we were turned down by all of them.
A couple of dozen, that means 20 to 25 publishers that you took this book to, and every one of them turned you down.
And the Christian publisher, and we had editors at publishing companies going, oh, we want to do this book, but they try to get through the publication board, and the board's going, I can't market this thing. It's too edgy for our Christian audience, is what they were saying. Well, we had intended it to be too edgy for their audience.
Because you never intended it to be a Christian.
Right. We didn't want to be there only.
Okay.
So then they would suggest, I mean, some of the biggest companies would say, we've got a secular publishing partner. Why don't you send it to them, and here's a name, and we'll recommend it. So we'd take it over there, and they would go, you know what, there's too much Jesus in here. You got to take it back to those guys. So we were stuck.
Okay.
So we couldn't print it. We either had to change it more than we wanted to get a Christian publisher to do it.
Okay, like to conform to what they wanted.
Yeah, the things we were being asked to change, we're going, no, well, no.
Okay.
So at the end of the day, it's we either print it or we throw away 16 months worth of work. So, I mean, I've been self-publishing my own books for 10 years. I left the publishing industry 10 years ago because there's no publishers in here, is there? Is there any big publishers in this area? Christian publishing is anything but Christian. Let me tell you, they're all owned by secular companies, and it's all about the bottom line, and it's all about making celebrities out of people that shouldn't be celebrities, to be honest. I don't think any of us should be.
Yeah.
We're comfortable with this, aren't you? Just because you've written a book on something doesn't make you an expert.
Yeah.
I hope the conversation we have now, I'm a brother on a journey. I'm not an expert in publishing. I'm not an expert in the love of God. I'm not an expert in anything. I'm a brother growing to know who God is and loving that journey. And if anything I've learned helps you, you're welcome to it. So I knew how to get a cover done. I knew how to get the book edited and get it put together. And we didn't know how to publicize it. We had no publishing strategy or no marketing strategy at all.
Okay. So as far as getting it out, you really didn't know what to do. So what did you do?
We printed it.
Printed it? You mean you made copies on the copy machine?
No, we went to a book publisher. We printed 10,000 copies.
Oh, really?
Paul and Brad borrowed money to do it. I had 5,000 in the account, so I switched it over, and we printed this little book, and we put it on my website, the godjourney.com podcast, and we had 1,000 pre-orders before the book before we even had it from the printer.
And you did no marketing?
No marketing other than those two things.
Yeah.
Those 1,000 went out, and then we sold 10,000. We sold those 11,000 books in 4 months. We sold 20,000 books the next month, 40 the next, 60 the next. Still had not advertised.
Out of your house, or did you?
At Brad's house. I'm smart enough not to put it in my house.
Okay.
My marriage is still alive today because I put it in Brad's house.
Okay, and then
my wife still loves me.
Right. So as we kind of finish this up, what is? I see the book in Borders. I see the book in Barnes and Nobles. I mean, how did you go from Brad's house? I mean, it seems like there had to be some sort of a connection there.
You think? Yeah, it was a weird deal because people who got the book online heard about people who'd read it online. Would go to bookstores and ask for the book. So the bookstores started asking the distributors, and the distributors started, we've never heard of this shack. How do we find it? And so Brad did send a little letter to Barnes & Noble with a copy of the first edition of The Shack and said, could you give our little book a chance? I know we're nobody, but please, I think this story is really good. And the buyer at Barnes & Noble saw his little note, saw the cover of the book, took it home one night, called us the next day, and she said, I'm going to drive your book to the top of the New York Times bestseller list. Barnes & Noble. I'll get who's out there?
Borders.
Okay. Anyway. Barnes & Noble gave us $100,000 of free advertising over the next 3 months, put it in the front of their stores, and she personally drove it to the top of the New York Times.
Because she read it, and obviously it impacted her life.
And then we'll give equal time to Borders. I was with Borders buyers. Paul and I were last October at a national convention of theirs. They wanted us to come and be with them. The CEO of Borders said that the Shack sales last year was the difference between them making a profit and them losing money last year. And that some stores, 33% of their sales was the Shack.
Oh my gosh.
Walmart had it, Costco has it. I mean, it's just everywhere now, it's crazy space.
I'll tell you, we're going to transition now.
Talk to these people?
Yeah. We're going to bring them into the conversation.
Cool.
Keith Wooden is going to help us with this.
Way to go, Keith.
Keith is a senior pastor at Oak.
They gave me microphones and they said the green dot means on, okay?
There you go.
I'm colorblind.
Oh! Well, it looks like you're doing all right.
I got one of them moving, so. Hey, what I'd like you to do is, we're going to make a couple of lines for questions in this aisle and that aisle over there. If you'll make your way, even if you're in the middle, people excuse you to get to the middle so we can get your question for Wayne and follow that up. So, good. You comfortable with that, Wayne?
I'm comfortable with anything.
And just raise your hand. I'll make sure we get to you.